I stumbled upon an article entitled The Psychopath Inside, and it's about the antisocial personality disorder by James Fallon. I was so intrigued that we invited Dr. Fallon on the show, and he will speak for himself. Dr. Fallon, thanks. It is an honor to have you on the program. Thanks for being with us.
Michael, thanks. I like that doo-wop you were playing there.
See that? Well, we have something in common anyway, which is old rock and roll. So, you know, you write these great books. You're a real professor as opposed to the people who don't do much in the universities. Chemical neuroanatomy, higher brain functions, brain imaging. You're the real McCoy. You got your postdoc in chemical neuroanatomy at UC San Diego. So you've looked inside the brain. You write this great book, The Psychopath Inside, a neuroscientist's personal journey into the dark side of the brain. And what intrigued me is you said that you found your own brain patterns are those of a psychopath.
Yeah, Michael, it was quite pretty strange and quite by accident. I had for years been studying the brain scans of murderers, serial killers, murderers, since 1989. And I was really going through a whole group of them that had just come in from different people, different scans, and I also, at the same time, we were doing clinical trials on Alzheimer's disease and schizophrenia. Well, we needed more people to be in the trial. We needed more normal people in the Alzheimer's trial, so I said, look, I'll get my family. This is the first mistake. And
wait a minute, so you were using your family as controls?
As controls. We didn't have Alzheimer's. In my side and on my wife's side, they did have Alzheimer's, but she didn't have it. Her mother and father had died with it, her brother, aunt, a lot on that side. So it was kind of taking a chance for her. And I said, how about getting a scan for, you and me and my brothers and sister and people in our family? And she said, let's go for it. And she was kind of brave because something many people don't even want to find out. So anyway, we did the study, the Alzheimer's study, and when it came back and I was looking at the PET scans, positron emission tomography brain scans, I leafed through them quickly because I've seen over 1,000 of these, so I know what normal, abnormal looks like. And I got through the whole pile, and they were all normal, so I really felt quite good about that because this is all my family scans. And I got to the bottom of the pile. I looked at it, and I started to laugh. Now, the two technicians were there. I said, real funny, guys. You slipped one in because I had a pile of these murder scans on the table. And I said, you did the old switcheroo because, people screw around in labs like they do anywhere, any office.
So what, you thought they put a murderer's brain scan in with your family?
Oh, yeah. I said, look, this guy at the bottom obviously is like a psychopath because it looked like the worst cake you could see. And I said, whoever it is shouldn't be walking around in open society.
Oh, come on, this is seriously funny.
Well, it was so strange. And they go, no, we're not kidding. And then I knew they weren't kidding. He said, it's part of your family. So I had to peel back the name because we don't have the names on them, just to for safety to society. And I peeled back, and there it was. It was my name, so it was...
I love it. Psychological nudity is the middle name of my show. So you actually have the same brain scan as murderers. What is, in the layman's terms, Dr. Fallon, what was different about your brain scan from the norm?
Well, my brain scan looked like all the psychopaths I had looked at. And the way all these brains look different is that the parts of the brain that process emotional behavior, it's called the limbic system, and it also has to do with social behavior with people, between people, and that's turned off. It's abnormally turned off in psychopaths, and it was in mine, and it was the whole system was like a perfect case, and the rest of the brain was normal, so it was almost like a pure case. So
let's take a case in real life, that evil Nicholas who shot the other kids in Florida. If you were to look, and you can't say you didn't, at his brain, that type, or the one in Las Vegas, they would have the limbic feedback system would be shut off. Is that what you're saying?
Well, people kill for different reasons. Of those, the psychopaths have a very similar brain pattern. So if they were psychopaths, they would have this part of the brain turned off, yes.
Unbelievable. I have to go out and get a scan now. I'm pretty sure most people in talk radio would match yours.
Well, there's a high percentage of people in different professions, and one is journalism.
I know, I'm sure of it. You have to have some kind of turnoff of a feedback in order to do this every day and not be affected by it to the point where you become immobile.
Exactly. It's about 1% of each society on Earth. Every society has them, and so there's an idea that there's some survival value probably for the species to have a certain percentage of these people in the society. It's bad,
Now you're touching on a raw nerve, because I was thinking about that. How are you going to get a soldier to go on the front lines and cut another man's guts out in a knife fight unless he has some of the same characteristics, right?
Well, if one of the things is there is the infantry, and usually in the infantry there is the touch of the sleeve. That's very important, okay? The touch of the sleeve has to do with empathy, and usually emotional empathy, the same kind of emotional empathy you'd have between best friends, for example. And so people in infantry have this emotional empathy, and that is not found in psychopaths. You tend to find it more in lone wolves, in snipers, things like that, where they don't have to empathize with people, and in fact, they're targets, just like the targets of the guy in Vegas. Were just, they weren't humans. They were just so that you tend to find them there. Now, I'm not saying that snipers are psychopaths, but that sort of personality.
No, the truth is, and I'm not making this up, one of my best friends is a sniper, and a very distinguished one. I'm going to be a little more careful around him now.
That's right. That's right.
Now, you're also an expert. You work for the Pentagon's Joint Command,
right?
And you're an expert in the field of cognition and war. What is that about, Doctor?
Well, the idea, I was brought in to, the different panels and meetings to advise the Pentagon, and the idea is, if war is inevitable, and even in the Pentagon they hate war, but if war is inevitable, how do we reduce the total trauma of war? That is, how do we get somebody to, when they return from war, not to remain a killer? How to avoid PTSD? How to find people who will react and react effectively? Because if you sit around thinking too much, you're going to die, right? You're going to get shot yourself. So how do you maximize that behavioral response necessary for that athletic event that is war, but without exposing people who are susceptible to PTSD or having psychopaths? You know what, psychopaths, well, they just come back in society after the war and then are predators on citizens near them. So it's how do we sort of balance these two things? So
how come so you have the same brain pattern, to go back to what you initially said, as that of murderers, but you haven't become a murderer. You're a distinguished scientist and author. Why do you think you did not end up a criminal? And more broadly, does that apply to the general public as well, of people who may have the same brain scan?
Right, and that's a great question. And we don't know in my case or in other cases where it doesn't happen. So you can prove the negative, or why something didn't happen. But from what we know now, it's important. Two things are important. First of all, most of your personality traits, these are normal traits with a different range of aggression, high aggression, low aggression, they're normal, and everybody has a different combination. And there's about 350 of these behaviors. They're called, adaptive traits. And each of those is regulated by about 10, 15, 20 genes. And so depending on the random assortment of gene forms that you get from your mother and father, you're then set with a certain personality traits. Now, those are fine. The problem is, if early in life, between birth and, let's say, 3 years of age, if you're abused or abandoned, this is very bad. So there's always the question of nature and nurture. What's more important? Well, it turns out to not be the right question, which we found out in the past few years. It's the environment is important if you have the susceptibility genes for these personality disorders, violence, etc. If you're resistant, then, it's like that kid that falls down the stairs. He jumps up laughing or he gets hit. Some people are very resistant. But if you have those genes and you're abused, then this is big trouble.
Then you become a vengeance type, a get even type. How can we spot a psychopath? You say you can read them on a PET scan, but what about a man walking down the street in a normal conversation at work or in the family? Are there any signs?
Well, first of all, Michael, you can't look at a brain scan or the genetics to determine if somebody's a murderer or a psychopath. You have to do that behaviorally by several days of expert analysis by a psychiatrist who understands personality disorders. Once you established, you have to get inside their head. It's not just their behavior. And remember, a sociopath, psychopath, they do the same things but for different reasons. So you have to get inside the head of them, and that takes some days of analysis to find out. And so that's how you find out if somebody's a psychopath. And then once you do, then the PET scans, fMRIs, the genetics will tell you why they're that way. And so that's it's kind of reverse of the way people usually think of it. Yeah.
Fascinating. So you can't really tell, in other words, from the outside. It's really behavior-based. In other words, if they act like a murderer, they're a murderer. And then you look back and say, here's why. But can you predict in advance? This is an area almost like Brave New World, where we're going to start scanning the brains of young children and say, we better put this guy away because he might be a murderer. We're not going to do that, are we?
No, but there are, kids have early signs of behaviors that later can be, it becomes psychopathy if the person has a certain genetics and brain pattern and they're abused. So the idea is the positive side of it is that if we know that somebody's susceptible, you tell the parents, make sure this kid doesn't get bullied, and you got to watch out for this kid. I'm personally, because of my politics, I'm a libertarian, so I'm against that, but it would work. And so that's it's one of these things you think neuroscience and genetics are going to help society. It actually makes it kind of worse because it gives you these options that are not consistent, I think, with an open democracy and the freedom of individual. But that's a political discussion, but practically it could be done.
We're speaking with Dr. James Fallon, author of The Psychopath Inside, which is an unbelievable book. What about people who choose certain professions? Are there certain professions, as we hinted at before, where you might find people who fit this profile a little bit more than people would think? Do you have another few minutes after the break, Dr. Fallon?
Okay.
Can you stay with? You know why? Because I don't want to go back to what Trump just did with the budget, because our hearts are broken, and I'd rather stick with this phenomenal discussion on the Savage Nation. The minute I come back, we'll go back with Are You a Psychopath? How would I know? Back in a minute. We go back now to my sterling guest, Dr. James Fallon, author of The Psychopath Inside. Dr. Fallon, any closing words for my audience?
Yeah, sure, Michael. People should keep in mind that there's two basic kinds of groups of traits of psychopaths. One is called fearless dominance, and they're very positive, pro-social traits that people like. They're glib, they have low anxiety, low depression, a sense of well-being, and they have a light around them when you walk into a room. They seem to have charisma. People are attracted to it. That's the part that they will show people for the longest time. So it's very hard to see this until you start interacting with them.
Wait, you're saying that many psychopaths have this trait?
Oh, yeah. No, this is what's so dangerous, that they come across, they're very charming, very glib.
So in other words, the con man has that, right? The confidence man has that.
Yes, absolutely. Now, the other group of traits, it's called self-centered impulsivity, which is this carefree sort of impulsiveness. It's egocentric, but it has to do with aggressiveness and antisocial behavior and criminality. That's the negative side. They will not show you that part for a while. If psychopaths may work somebody for weeks or months before, or even years sometimes, before they really go after them, either to take them for all they're worth or to really control them. The idea is they're predators on other people. They'll have many people going at one time, so they can be kind of patient, the smart ones.
Well, it sounds like a dating game in some regards. A lot of guys use these tactics. Don't a lot of men come on with the good side, in other words, first, and then show you the dark side?
That's exactly it. So you don't know what's coming, usually for a while. And then they start...
Look, I only got 20 seconds. James Fallon, I knew this would be good. It's going to be better again because I'd like you back on the show. You're based in the East Coast, right? You're not in my neighborhood where you can do a PET scan of my brain over the weekend?
Well, I live in Southern California, so...
All right, I have a home down there. I have to give you a call and put my head inside a machine and see what motivates me and what makes Sammy run. James Fallon, great guest doctor. The book is The Psychopath Inside. When I come back, we talk about, the budget.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE.